You know what the really funny thing is? We thought we had them cornered. I mean, really, truly, absolutely cornered. The Valdrath Collective, all 743 member species, against one pathetic little blue world at the edge of the galactic arm. The math was simple. The outcome was obvious. The humans were done. Spoiler alert, we were idiots. My name is Corvin Thale, and I used to be a strategic analyst for the Valdrath High Command. Notice I said used to be. That's because after what happened, after what they did, well, let's just say my job description became somewhat obsolete. Hard to analyze strategy when the enemy refuses to follow any logical pattern whatsoever. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up, way back. Back to when we still thought we were the smartest beings in the universe. The war started like most wars do. Stupidly. The humans had been expanding their little colonial efforts into what we considered Valdrath space. Now, technically, and I mean technically in the most bureaucratic sense possible, the space wasn't actually ours. It was unclaimed. But we'd been eyeing those systems for about 3 centuries, so naturally we considered them ours by right of, I don't know, cosmic dibs or something equally ridiculous. The humans didn't see it that way. Shocking, right? First contact was, how should I put this? Less than ideal. Commander Vex Toril, a Vindron with more pride than sense, decided the best way to greet humanity was to fire a warning shot across the bow of their colony ship. Just a little plasma burst. Nothing serious. Just a friendly hello that screamed, "Get out of our territory or else." The humans responded by ramming their colony ship straight into Vex's flagship. I repeat, they rammed a civilian vessel, filled with families and children and all their worldly possessions, directly into a military dreadnought. On purpose, at full speed, while broadcasting what I can only assume was their most creative collection of insults and profanity across every available channel. Both ships exploded in a spectacular fireball that could be seen from 6 systems away. Vex Toril died instantly, which honestly was probably more merciful than he deserved for starting this whole mess. 3,000 humans also died in that collision. 3,000 civilians who chose mutual destruction over surrender. That should have been our first clue. That should have been the moment we said, you know what, maybe these crazy apes aren't worth the trouble. But no, we decided to interpret it as desperation, as the act of a primitive species that didn't understand the rules of civilized warfare. We were so wrong. The Valdrath Collective declared war exactly 17 hours after the incident. The vote was unanimous. Even the peaceful Erendi, who hadn't voted for military action in 6,000 years, agreed that humanity needed to be taught a lesson. The resolution was eloquent. The speeches were stirring. The call to arms was met with enthusiasm from every corner of the collective. We were going to crush these upstart primates in a matter of weeks, a month at most. Then we'd accept their surrender, impose some reasonable reparations, maybe occupy their planet for a decade or 2 until they learned proper galactic etiquette. Standard procedure. Clean, simple, effective. I was assigned to the analytical division under High Strategist Mira Corvin, a brilliant Silthani who had orchestrated 47 successful campaigns without a single loss. She was confident. We were all confident. The data was clear. Humanity had 12 colony worlds, maybe 300 warships total, and a population of roughly 30 billion spread across 13 systems. We had 743 species, 68,000 worlds, 4 million warships, and a combined population that exceeded 9 trillion. The math was laughable. This wasn't going to be a war. It was going to be an extermination, a pest control operation on a galactic scale. We sent the first fleet to Earth, 2,000 ships, each one bigger than anything humanity had ever built. Each one crewed by experienced warriors from a dozen different species, each one equipped with weapons that could glass a planet from orbit. The fleet arrived at Earth after a 3-week transit. Admiral Court Sixon, a decorated Malthari with over a century of combat experience, opened a channel to the human homeworld. He expected immediate surrender. He'd brought terms that were actually quite generous considering the circumstances. Humanity would become a protectorate, disarm their military, open their systems to Valdrath oversight, and pay modest reparations over the next 50 years. Harsh but fair. The humans told him to eat organic waste and expire. Well, they didn't use those exact words. What they actually said was significantly more vulgar and anatomically creative. The message ended with what I later learned was called a middle finger gesture, which apparently is humanity's way of expressing profound disagreement. Admiral Sixon, not being a being known for his patience, gave the order to commence orbital bombardment. Show them we mean business. Break their spirit. Standard intimidation tactics that had worked on literally every other species we'd ever encountered. Then something weird happened. The humans didn't run. They didn't hide. They didn't beg for mercy or scramble to evacuate their cities. Instead, every single defensive platform they had, every orbital station, every converted cargo hauler with weapons bolted to the hull, every last ship and satellite and floating piece of junk they could throw at us, they threw at us, all at once. It was the most disorganized, chaotic, absolutely insane attack I'd ever seen analyzed. There was no formation, no strategy, no attempt at tactical superiority, just pure, unadulterated violence. They came at the First Fleet like a swarm of angry insects, stinging and biting and sacrificing themselves without hesitation. We destroyed them, obviously. Our shields held, our weapons were superior, our training was better. For every one of our ships they managed to damage, we destroyed 100 of theirs. The battle lasted 6 hours. At the end of it, the human defensive fleet was completely annihilated. Not a single ship remained. Admiral Sixon prepared to begin the bombardment. He opened channels to the human governments one final time. This is your last chance. Surrender now or face complete destruction. The humans responded with a single transmission. It was a human male, elderly, wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. His face was weathered and scarred. His eyes were calm. When he spoke, his voice was steady, almost conversational. He said, and I'm translating from the original language here, "We expected you to be smarter than this." We really did. But since you are not, let me explain something about humanity that you should have researched before starting this war. We don't surrender. We don't quit. And we sure as hell don't lose. You have just destroyed our fleet. You think that makes you strong. You think that makes us weak. But what you don't understand, what you can't understand, is that every single one of those pilots chose to die. They chose it. They volunteered for it. They said goodbye to their families and flew straight into your guns knowing, absolutely knowing, they wouldn't come home. And you know what the really beautiful part is? There are 30 billion more of us who will make that exact same choice. So go ahead. Bombard our cities. Kill millions. Kill billions. It won't matter. Because for every human you kill, 1,000 more will dedicate their entire existence to making sure you pay for it. This isn't a war you can win, Admiral. This is a war you just condemned your entire collective to lose. Then the transmission ended. Admiral Sixon laughed. Actually laughed. He turned to his staff and made some joke about human bravado and empty threats. Then he gave the order to commence bombardment. That's when the moon exploded. Not Earth's moon. One of the small orbital stations we'd mistaken for a moon. Turns out it was a station. A really, really big station. Filled with really, really big explosives. And when it detonated, it created a shock wave that tore through our tightly packed fleet formation like a blade through flesh. We lost 400 ships in the first 30 seconds. 400. The flagship survived but was crippled. Half the First Fleet was either destroyed or disabled before we even understood what had happened. The humans had sacrificed their entire defensive fleet to draw us in close, to make us bunch up, to position us exactly where they wanted us. Then they set off a bomb big enough to crack a small planet and turned our numerical advantage into a death trap. It was brilliant. It was insane. It was absolutely, completely, horrifyingly human. But we still had 1,600 ships. We were hurt but not beaten. Admiral Sixon regrouped, pulled back to a safer distance, and prepared for a longer siege. Fine. If the humans wanted to play dirty, we could play dirty too. We'd starve them out, cut off their supply lines, blockade the system until they had no choice but to surrender. That strategy lasted about 2 weeks. Turns out humanity had been preparing for this war longer than we'd been planning it. While we were debating and voting and giving speeches, they were building. Shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, manufacturing plants buried kilometers beneath the surface of barren moons, genetic research labs doing things that violated about 47 different galactic conventions. They also did something that still makes my manipulator appendages shake when I think about it. They militarized their entire civilian population, not just drafting soldiers. I mean, they gave weapons to everyone. Children were trained in combat tactics. The elderly were taught to build explosives. Scientists abandoned their research to design new ways to kill us. Artists created propaganda that turned every human into a willing martyr. Within a month of the war starting, there wasn't a single human who wasn't actively participating in the war effort. Not one. Their entire species became a weapon aimed directly at us. The second fleet arrived to reinforce Admiral Sixon. 3,000 more ships. Fresh crews. New tactics. We were going to crush them through sheer attrition. There was no way they could match our production capacity. No way they could sustain losses at the rate they were taking them. Except they could. Because they didn't care about sustainability. They didn't care about logistics or strategic reserves or maintaining a functional economy. They converted everything, every single resource they had, into weapons. Their scientists created something they called the Genesis Protocol, automated shipyards that could construct a warship in 72 hours using nothing but raw materials and solar power. They scattered thousands of these shipyards across their systems, hidden in asteroid fields, buried in comets, disguised as space debris. We'd destroy 10, and 20 more would activate. It was like fighting a hydra, if that hydra was made of metal and spite and refused to acknowledge the basic principles of economics. The war that was supposed to last a month dragged into 6 months, then a year. Our casualties mounted, not catastrophically, but enough to cause concern. The collective started questioning the war effort. Some species wanted to negotiate. Others wanted to escalate. The debate became heated. Meanwhile, humanity was suffering. Oh, they were suffering badly. We'd destroyed dozens of their cities, killed hundreds of millions. Their industrial capacity was a fraction of what it had been. By any reasonable metric, they should have surrendered 10 times over. But reasonable was not a word that applied to humans. My strategist Mira Corvin called an emergency meeting. I was there, standing in the strategy room surrounded by holographic displays showing casualty reports and tactical analyses. The numbers were wrong, all wrong. We were winning every battle, destroying their ships at a rate of 10 to 1, occupying their colonies, controlling their space. But we weren't winning the war. Mira's voice was tight when she spoke. She was Silthani, a species known for their emotional control, but even she couldn't hide the frustration. They are not fighting to win, she said, manipulating the displays to show patterns we'd been tracking. They are fighting to make us lose. Every engagement is designed to inflict maximum casualties on us regardless of their own losses. They are trading lives for time. They are bleeding us slowly. They can't sustain this, someone argued. A Heptaran commander whose name I have forgotten. Their population is finite. Their resources are depleting. Another year, maybe 2, and they will collapse. Will they? Mira asked quietly. Because according to our intelligence, they are doing something in their outer systems, something classified. Our scouts keep disappearing when they get too close. And the energy signatures we are detecting don't match any known technology. So we investigate. Another officer suggested, send a proper fleet. find out what they are hiding and destroy it. We did. We sent 500 ships to the outer edges of the human systems to investigate the strange readings, to find whatever secret project they were working on and eliminate it before it became operational. Those 500 ships never reported back, never sent a distress signal, never left any wreckage for us to analyze. They just vanished. Gone. As if they'd never existed at all. That's when we started to get scared. Really, truly scared. Because an enemy you can fight is one thing. An enemy that can make 500 warships disappear without a trace is something else entirely. The collective demanded answers. The High Command scrambled to provide them. I spent weeks analyzing every scrap of data we had, trying to figure out what the humans were doing in those outer systems. Then, exactly 18 months after the war started, we found out. A transmission came through on every channel. Every single communication frequency we used. It overrode our encryptions, bypassed our security, and played simultaneously on every ship, every station, every world in the collective. It was the same elderly human from the first message. He looked older now, tired, but his eyes still held that same calm certainty. "Hello again," he said, and I swear there was a smile in his voice. "We told you this was a war you couldn't win. You didn't listen. That's okay. We didn't really expect you to. Arrogance tends to be universal, it seems. But now we have something to show you. Something that should have been impossible. Something that breaks every law of physics your scientists hold dear. Want to know what it is?" The transmission cut to external footage. A view of space. Empty space. Nothing remarkable. Just stars and darkness. Then the stars started going out. One by one, across an entire sector, the stars simply vanished. Not dimmed. Not eclipsed. Vanished, replaced by nothing. By void. By an absence so complete that it made my brain hurt trying to process it. The elderly human's voice came back. "We found something out here in the dark. Something old. Something waiting. Your people have rules about what technology is acceptable. You have ethics committees and regulatory bodies and all sorts of lovely bureaucracy designed to keep you safe. We don't have that anymore. We gave up safety the moment you decided to try to exterminate us. So we did what you were too scared to do. We opened doors that should have stayed closed. We made deals with things that should have stayed forgotten. And now, well, now you get to see what desperation looks like when it's backed by 30 billion angry primates who have absolutely nothing left to lose." But the void in space began to move, to shift, to take shape. And when it did, when we finally saw what humanity had created or summoned or awakened, every single analyst in the strategy room made the exact same sound. It was the sound of hope dying. Because staring back at us from the void was something that should not, could not, must not exist. It defied classification. It violated causality. It was wrong in a way that transcended simple danger and entered the realm of existential nightmare. "We call it the erasure," the human said conversationally, as if he were discussing the weather and not the end of everything. "It doesn't destroy matter. It removes the concept of matter. It makes things UN happen. Your 500 ships? They didn't die. They never existed. We retroactively removed them from reality. And now we are going to give you a choice. A real choice this time. You can withdraw. All of you? Every ship, every soldier, every bureaucrat who voted for this war. You can leave and never come back. Or, option 2. We can let the erasure loose on your worlds, your people, your entire collective. We can make you all not exist. Your choice. You have 72 hours to decide." The transmission ended. The strategy room was silent, completely, utterly silent. We all stared at the displays showing that impossible void where stars used to be, where 500 of our ships used to be, where the laws of reality used to apply. Someone, I don't remember who, whispered a question that we were all thinking. Can they really do that? Can they really erase entire worlds? My strategist Mira Corvin didn't answer immediately. She just kept staring at the void on the display. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow, defeated. I don't know, she said, but are you willing to bet 9 trillion lives that they are bluffing? Nobody was. The emergency session of the Valdrath Collective Council lasted 16 hours. Every species sent representatives. Every voice was heard. The debate was furious. Some wanted to call the human bluff. Some wanted to negotiate. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to launch a full-scale assault on Earth before the humans could deploy their weapon. In the end, pragmatism won. Or maybe cowardice. Honestly, from where I was standing, they looked pretty similar. The collective voted to withdraw, not unanimously this time. There were holdouts, species that refused to bow to human threats. But the majority ruled, and the withdrawal order was given. Every Valdrath ship was ordered back to collective space. Every occupation force was recalled. Every blockade was lifted. Within 1 week, we were gone, completely gone. We left the human systems as if we'd never been there at all. Well, almost never. We left behind cities in ruins, colonies burned to bedrock, hundreds of millions of human dead. We left behind the scars of a war that should have ended in our victory but instead ended in our retreat. The humans didn't pursue, didn't gloat, didn't even send a final transmission rubbing their victory in our faces. They just watched us go, silent, patient, waiting. Some of the collective species wanted to try again, wanted to regroup, rebuild, come back stronger. Those voices were quickly silenced when the humans sent one final message. No words this time, just an image, a star map, showing every single collective world, with coordinates, with population numbers, with a helpful little caption that said, "We know where you live, all of you. Don't make us come find you." That was 4 years ago. 4 years since the final war ended. Not with a treaty. Not with negotiations. Not with diplomacy or compromise or any of the civilized methods we'd used for millennia. It ended with humanity making us too terrified to continue fighting. Oh, the collective still exists. We still have our 743 species, our 68,000 worlds, our trillions of citizens. But we are different now. Quieter, more careful. Because we know, all of us know, that out there in the dark, humanity is watching, waiting, building whatever horrifying weapons their mad scientists can conceive, preparing for the day when someone else decides to test them. And me. I'm retired, living on a quiet agricultural world far from any strategic importance. I spend my days analyzing crop yields instead of battle formations. It's peaceful, boring, safe. But sometimes, late at night, I look up at the stars and I think about that void, about the erasure, about an entire species willing to burn the universe down rather than submit. And I wonder if we ever really understood what we were fighting. If we ever truly comprehended what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. The answer is no, we didn't. We thought they were primitives, savages, inferior. We were wrong about everything. And the scariest part? The part that keeps me awake even now? We only saw what they were willing to show us. The erasure was their opening move, their warning shot, which means somewhere out there, in those dark spaces between stars, humanity has things waiting, things worse, things they didn't need to deploy because we were smart enough to run. The final war didn't end with a treaty. It ended with humanity teaching the entire galaxy a lesson that we are never going to forget. They taught us that humans don't fight fair. They don't follow rules. They don't accept defeat. And most importantly, they don't care about winning in any traditional sense. They only care about making absolutely certain that losing costs their enemies everything. So yeah, we won every battle. We had superior numbers, superior technology, superior everything. And we still lost. lost so completely that we will probably never recover. Not really. Not in any way that matters. Because you can rebuild ships. You can replace soldiers. You can heal from physical wounds. But you can't unsee something that proves the universe is more terrifying than you ever imagined. You can't unlearn that somewhere out there is a species crazy enough to weaponize reality itself. You can't unfeel the fear that comes from knowing humanity is out there watching and absolutely, completely capable of erasing you if you ever cross them again. That's the thing about humans. They don't want territory. They don't want dominance. They don't want to rule the galaxy. They just want to be left alone, and they have made it abundantly clear that the cost of not leaving them alone is more than anyone is willing to pay. The war is over. Humanity won. And the rest of us? We are just living in their galaxy now, hoping, praying that we never give them a reason to remind us of that fact. Welcome to the new reality. Population 30 billion angry apes who refuse to follow anyone's rules but their own. Proceed with caution. Better yet, don't proceed at all. Trust me on this one. 4 years of peace. 4 years of watching the darkness between stars and wondering when humanity would decide we needed another lesson. 4 years of the Valdrath Collective pretending everything was fine while simultaneously being absolutely terrified. I thought I was done with this story. I thought retirement meant leaving the nightmares behind. Turns out the universe has a sense of humor almost as twisted as humanity's survival instinct. Because 3 months ago, everything changed again. And once more, I got pulled right back into the middle of it. It started with the Kryn. Remember how I said some species wanted to try again, wanted to prove that humanity just got lucky? The Kryn were those idiots. Plural, all 260 million of them on their 17 colony worlds. They were one of the smaller collective members. Aggressive, proud, absolutely convinced they were the galaxy's apex predators. They weren't in the collective anymore, by the way. They'd withdrawn about a year after the war ended, called us cowards, said we'd embarrassed ourselves by retreating from primitives, declared they'd show everyone how real warriors handled the human problem. I tried to warn them. Personally. I sent messages to their high command explaining in excruciating detail exactly why attacking humanity was the worst idea anyone had ever conceived. I used small words. I drew diagrams. I might have even begged a little. They ignored me, called me a fearmonger, a coward, a species traitor for even suggesting that humanity was anything other than a lucky, technologically inferior pest that needed exterminating. So the Kryn did what aggressive, stupid species always do. They gathered their fleet, all 8,000 ships, their entire military might. They announced their intentions on every public channel. They were going to succeed where the collective had failed. They were going to show humanity what real warriors looked like. They were going to conquer Earth and enslave the survivors as an example to the entire galaxy. The announcement was theatrical, dramatic, being full of boasts and threats and promises of glory. The Kryn commander, a female named Sirik Tan, gave a speech that lasted 47 minutes. She compared humanity to various vermin. She questioned our collective intelligence for ever being afraid. She guaranteed victory within 6 months. The galaxy watched, waited. Some species quietly hoped the Kryn would succeed. Others started placing bets on how long the Kryn would survive. I just felt sick. Because I knew, absolutely knew, what was coming. The Kryn fleet departed for human space with great fanfare, parades, celebrations, promises of spoils and territory. Their entire species was euphoric. Finally, someone was standing up to the human threat. Finally, someone was going to put those uppity apes in their place. The fleet arrived at the outermost human colony 3 weeks later. A small world called Haven with maybe 5 million inhabitants. The Kryn sent the standard demands. Surrender or be destroyed. Comply or face extinction. The usual threats that had worked on hundreds of species throughout history. The humans responded with a single word. No. Not no with an explanation. Not no with threats of their own. Just no. Simple. Final. Absolute. Sirik Tan gave the order to attack. The Kryn fleet opened fire on the orbital platforms. He destroyed them easily. Then they moved to bombardment positions and prepared to glass the major population centers. Standard intimidation tactics. Kill enough civilians and the government surrenders to save the rest. That's when something happened that made every analyst monitoring the situation sit up and pay very close attention. The humans on Haven didn't evacuate. They didn't panic. Didn't even seem particularly concerned. Instead, they opened communication channels to the Kryn fleet. Not military channels, civilian channels, every single one of them. 5 million voices. All speaking at once. All saying variations of the same thing. Come down here. Land your troops. Fight us face to face if you are so brave. Or are you too scared to face humans on equal terms? It was a taunt. An obvious, transparent attempt to bait the Kryn into ground combat instead of orbital bombardment. Any reasonable commander would have ignored it and continued with the bombardment. Kill them from orbit where it's safe, or where your technological advantage matters. Sirik Tan was not a reasonable commander. She was a Kryn, which meant her pride was directly proportional to her stupidity. She took the bait. Ordered a ground invasion. 2 million Kryn warriors in full combat gear, backed by armor and air support, against 5 million humans, most of them civilians, with whatever weapons they could scrounge. The odds were heavily in Kryn favor. Their warriors were bigger, stronger, better equipped. The tactics were proven across dozens of campaigns. This should have been a massacre. A quick, brutal demonstration of Kryn superiority. The battle lasted 6 hours. At the end of it, the Kryn had lost 90% of their ground forces. 90%. 1.8 million warriors. Dead. Not wounded. Not captured. Dead. Gone. Erased. The humans lost approximately 4.2 million, almost their entire population. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold when I read the reports. They didn't lose because they were weaker. They lost because they kept fighting, even when mortally wounded. They kept fighting, even when outnumbered 10-1. They kept fighting until literally unable to move. There were reports of humans with missing limbs still attacking Kryn warriors. Reports of children, actual younglings, detonating explosives in groups of Kryn soldiers. Reports of wounded humans playing dead until Kryn forces passed, then stabbing them in the back with improvised weapons. It wasn't a battle. It was a meat grinder. And the humans fed themselves into it willingly, gleefully, even if the intercepted communications were accurate. But the worst part, the part that should have made Sirik Tan immediately withdraw, was what happened at the end. When the last human on Haven died, when the Kryn thought they'd finally won, the entire planet detonated. Not bombed. Not attacked. The humans had rigged their own world to explode. Every major city had massive charges buried beneath it. When the last defender fell, the charges activated. The explosions created a chain reaction that tore the planet apart. Haven was gone. Just debris now, orbiting a sun that would never again shine on human faces. And with it went the remaining Kryn ground forces. Another 300,000 warriors, plus most of their landing craft, plus the portion of the fleet that had moved into low orbit to provide support. The Kryn lost an entire planet and over 2 million soldiers to kill 5 million civilians. Civilians who chose mutual annihilation over surrender. Again, they did it again, just like at first contact. Just like throughout the entire war, humanity's default response to aggression was apparently mutual destruction with extreme prejudice. Sirik Tan, to her credit, or perhaps to her eternal shame, didn't retreat. It didn't call for negotiations. She declared it a victory. Said it proved humans were cowards who couldn't win fair fights. Said the loss of Haven would break human morale. Said the Kryn would continue their glorious campaign. She led her remaining forces, maybe 6,000 ships now, deeper into human territory, toward the next colony, toward the next battle, toward what she believed would be certain victory. That's when humanity stopped playing. A transmission came through. Not to the Kryn, to everyone, every species, every world, every ship in the galaxy. It was a human female this time, young, maybe 30 cycles old. She was wearing a military uniform, but it looked worn, lived in. This wasn't someone who wore uniforms for ceremonies. This was someone who'd seen combat. Lots of it. Her name was Major Kira Voss, and when she spoke, her voice had that same calm certainty that the elderly human from before had possessed. That same quiet confidence that came from knowing, absolutely knowing, you held all the cards. "Hello, Galaxy," she said, and there was zero humor in her voice. "We have been watching the Kryn situation with interest." Well, interest might be the wrong word. Amusement? Pity? Hard to say. But since they have decided to make this everyone's problem by broadcasting their intentions across public channels, we figured we should respond publicly too. So here's what's going to happen. The Kryn have 72 hours to withdraw from human space. All forces, all ships, all personnel, if they comply. We will consider this a tragic misunderstanding. If they will go home, we will rebuild Haven. Everyone moves on. But if they don't, if they continue this invasion, we are going to do something we haven't done since the war ended. We are going to show you what we have been building for the last 4 years. She paused. Let that sink in. Somewhere in the Kryn fleet, Sirik Tan was probably laughing. Probably thinking this was more empty threats from a desperate species. But I wasn't laughing. Neither were any of the intelligence analysts monitoring the transmission. Because we remembered the erasure. We remembered what humanity was capable of when they stopped caring about rules. We are not going to deploy the erasure, Major Voss continued, and I felt a wave of relief so intense I nearly collapsed. The weapon was, and is, a last resort. A doomsday device for if someone tries to exterminate us again. The Kryn aren't trying to exterminate humanity. They are just trying to conquer us. Which is, adorable. Misguided and suicidal, but adorable. So we are going to use something else. Something new. Something we have been working on specifically for situations like this. The transmission cut to footage, space footage, showing nothing at first, just empty void. Then something appeared. Small at first, growing, expanding, taking shape. It looked like a ship. Sort of. The basic structure was there. Hull. Engines. Weapons. But it was wrong. The proportions were off. The materials didn't reflect light properly. And it was moving in ways that violated basic physics. Accelerating without thrust. Turning without maneuvering jets. Just moving. Like reality was a suggestion it chose to ignore. We call this the Phantasm class, Major Voss said conversationally. It exists partially in our dimension and partially in, well, somewhere else. Somewhere we are not entirely sure about yet. Our scientists have some theories, but honestly most of them involve math that makes people cry. The important thing is, the Phantasm can't be detected by conventional sensors. It can't be targeted by conventional weapons. Can't be stopped by conventional defenses. It's not invisible. It's just not entirely here. And we have built 300 of them. 300. 300 ships that broke the laws of physics. 300 weapons that couldn't be fought using any known tactics. 300 nightmares waiting to be deployed. So here's the deal, Major Voss said, and now there was something dangerous in her voice. Something cold. Kryn forces withdraw. Or we send the Phantasm fleet to every single Kryn world simultaneously. Not to bomb you, not to invade, just to sit there, in orbit, watching, waiting, being a constant reminder that at any moment, whenever we choose, we can do whatever we want to your worlds and you can't stop us. You will live in fear, constant, unending fear. Your children will grow up seeing ships in the sky that they can't fight, can't escape, can't even properly perceive. That's your choice. Withdraw and forget this ever happened. Or spend the rest of your species' existence living under the shadow of human vengeance. The transmission ended. The galaxy held its breath, waiting, watching, wondering what the Kryn would do. They attacked. Of course they attacked. Pride is a hell of a drug, and the Kryn had overdosed decades ago. Sirik Tan declared the transmission was proof of human desperation. More empty threats, more psychological warfare. She ordered her fleet to continue toward the next human colony at maximum speed. Humanity deployed the Phantasm fleet exactly 48 hours later. Not 72, 48, because apparently humans don't believe in giving the full-time limit when someone's being particularly stupid. The Phantasm ships appeared over all 17 Kryn worlds simultaneously. They just materialized. No warning, no detectable approach. They were just suddenly there, in perfect formation, hovering over every major city, every military installation, every population center. Yep, the Kryn tried everything, shot every weapon they had at those ships. Missiles, plasma, kinetic rounds, even some experimental weapons that were borderline illegal under collective law. Nothing worked. The weapons either passed through the Phantasm ships like they weren't there, or impacted against nothing and detonated harmlessly in space. The Phantasm ships didn't fire back. They didn't attack. Didn't do anything except hover there, silent, menacing. Proof that humanity could reach out and touch any Kryn world whenever they wanted. Back in human space, Sirik Tan finally understood what she'd done. Her fleet had been moving toward the next colony. They arrived to find it completely empty. Evacuated. Not a single human remained. Just automated defenses. And a message. You wanted a fight. We gave you one. You wanted to prove Kryn's superiority. You failed. Now you have a choice. Turn around and go home, or continue forward and find out what happens when humanity stops being nice. Sirik Tan, credit where it's due, made the smart choice. Finally, she ordered the retreat. Her fleet turned around and headed back to Kryn space at maximum speed. But here's the thing about humanity. They don't forgive. They don't forget. And they sure as hell don't let threats go unpunished. The Phantasm ships followed the Kryn fleet home. All 300 of them. Just followed. And didn't attack. Didn't harass. Just stayed in formation behind the retreating Kryn forces like the galaxy's most terrifying escort. When the Kryn fleet arrived back at their home system, the Phantasm ships took up positions in orbit. 1 ship per world. 17 ships total. The remaining 283 formed a perimeter around the entire Kryn system. A blockade. A cage. A reminder. The Kryn government demanded they leave. The collective demanded humanity withdraw. Independent species filed protests. Everyone was suddenly very concerned about this act of aggression. Humanity's response was delivered by that same Major Kira Voss. She looked tired now, older, like the weight of what she was doing was finally hitting her. But her voice was still steady, still certain. The Phantasm fleet will remain in Kryn space for exactly 1 year, she said. During that time, they will not interfere with Kryn activities, will not attack, will not even communicate. They will just be there, watching, making sure the Kryn understand the consequences of their actions. After 1 year, they will withdraw. But if, at any point during that year, the Kryn make any aggressive moves toward human space, or any other species for that matter, the Phantasm fleet will stop being nice. We will demonstrate their full capabilities. And trust me when I say, you don't want that. Nobody wants that. This is mercy. This is us being reasonable. This is the best offer anyone's going to get. Then she leaned forward, and for the first time I saw emotion in her face. Sadness, regret, maybe even guilt. We didn't want this, she said quietly. We didn't want any of this. We just wanted to be left alone. to build our colonies, to explore the stars, to live in peace. You wouldn't let us. The collective wouldn't let us. Now the Kryn won't let us. So fine. If the galaxy insists on testing us, on pushing us, on trying to conquer us, then we will do what we have to do. We will become the monsters you apparently need us to be. But understand this. Everything that happens from here on out is your choice, your decision, your fault. We are just responding to your aggression with overwhelming force. That's not villainy. That's called learning from history. The transmission ended. The Phantasm fleet remained in position. The Kryn were trapped in their own system. Not prisoners exactly, since they could still move between their worlds, but contained. Quarantined, living proof that humanity could project power across the galaxy without firing a single shot. The collective held emergency sessions. The debates raged about intervention. Some species wanted to help the Kryn, others saw this as justice. The arguments went in circles for weeks. In the end, nobody did anything, because nobody wanted to be next. Nobody wanted to discover what other weapons humanity had developed. Nobody wanted to test whether the erasure was still just a deterrent or an active threat. 3 months into the occupation, something interesting happened. The Kryn started changing. Their government issued formal apologies, not just to humanity, to everyone, every species they'd ever threatened or attacked, every world they'd raided, every conflict they'd started. They apologized for everything, offered reparations, begged forgiveness. At first, everyone thought it was strategy, a ploy to get the Phantasm fleet to leave early. But as weeks turned to months, the changes seemed genuine. The Kryn dismantled their offensive fleets, converted military shipyards to civilian production, started focusing on trade and diplomacy instead of conquest. Living under constant surveillance by ships they couldn't fight had broken something fundamental in Kryn psychology. Or maybe fixed something. Hard to say. But the species that had been so proud, so aggressive, so certain of their superiority, they were different now. Quieter. Humbler. Better. I watched all this from retirement. Analyzed it because old habits die hard. And I started to understand something that maybe should have been obvious from the beginning. Humanity wasn't trying to conquer the galaxy, wasn't trying to establish dominance. They were trying to train us. Like you'd train aggressive animals, reward peaceful behavior, punish aggression, establish clear boundaries, and enforce them consistently. It was humiliating. The entire galaxy being trained like unruly pets. But it was also effective. Species that had been aggressive for millennia were suddenly reconsidering their life choices. Conflicts that had raged for centuries were being resolved through negotiation. Everyone was being very, very careful not to upset the humans. The 1-year deadline approached. Analysts across the galaxy watched to see if humanity would keep their word. If the Phantasm fleet would actually withdraw. Or if this was permanent. If humanity had decided to become the galaxy's jailers. On the exact day, the exact hour, the exact minute the deadline passed, the Phantasm ships vanished. All of them. Gone. Back to wherever humanity kept their nightmares when they weren't using them. The Kryn were free. Changed, yes. Traumatized, absolutely. But free. And humanity had kept their word. Proven they could be trusted to follow their own rules even when nobody could force them to. That was 2 months ago. Since then, things have been strange. Peaceful almost. But it's a weird peace. The kind where everyone is polite because they are scared. Where conflicts get resolved quickly because nobody wants to escalate. Where humanity sits at the edge of known space, building whatever they are building, and everyone else tries very hard not to think about what that might be. I got a message last week from Major Kira Voss herself. I don't know how she found me. Don't know why she bothered reaching out to a retired analyst living on an agricultural world. But she did. The message was short, simple, almost friendly. Mr. Thale, she wrote, and I could hear her voice in the words. I have read your analyses, your reports. your predictions. You were right about almost everything. You understood us better than most, better than your own leadership. So I wanted to tell you something nobody else knows. The erasure? It was a bluff. We never actually built it. The void? You saw? Experimental shielding technology. The disappeared ships, redirected to different coordinates using spatial manipulation. The whole thing was theater, smoke and mirrors. We made you see what you feared most and you ran. Just like we knew you would. I stopped breathing when I read that. Reread it a dozen times to make sure I understood. They bluffed. The weapon that ended the war. The doomsday device that haunted every species' nightmares. It never existed. Humanity won the greatest conflict in galactic history with a magic trick. The message continued. But the Phantasm fleet? That's real. Very real. And it's not even our best weapon. We have got things in development that make the Phantasm look like a child's toy. We are not telling you this to scare you. We are telling you because we think you deserve the truth. You tried to warn your people, tried to stop the war, tried to save lives. That matters. So here's the real truth, Mr. Thale. We don't want to be monsters. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to make absolutely certain that nobody ever tries to exterminate us again. Everything we do, every weapon we build, every terrifying display of power, it's all defensive. We are not the aggressors. We are just really, really good at making sure aggression against us is too costly to consider. She signed off with something that I think was supposed to be reassuring but actually made things worse. Sleep well, Mr. Thale. The galaxy is safer now than it's been in centuries. Because everyone knows there's a species out here crazy enough to weaponize reality itself if pushed too far. Even if they haven't actually done it yet, fear is a powerful deterrent. And humanity has gotten very good at managing fear. Yours truly, Major Kira Voss, Human Defense Initiative. I should have been relieved. The erasure wasn't real. The greatest threat to existence was just clever engineering and psychological warfare, but somehow that made it worse. Because if humanity could fake something that terrifying, if they could sell a bluff that completely, what else were they capable of? What other tricks did they have? What was real and what was theater? That's the genius of it. That's what makes humanity so dangerous. We can't tell anymore. Can't distinguish between their actual capabilities and their psychological operations. They have made us afraid of shadows, afraid of possibilities, afraid of what they might do rather than what they can do. And you know what the really twisted part is? I think they enjoy it. I think somewhere in human psychology there's a part that genuinely gets satisfaction from making other species scared. Not in a cruel way. More like how you'd enjoy successfully bluffing in a game, pride in a job well done, satisfaction at outsmarting someone. The galaxy has changed. The collective is different now, more peaceful, more careful, more aware that aggression has consequences. Species talk instead of fighting, negotiate instead of invading. All because 30 billion humans on 13 worlds managed to convince 9 trillion beings across 68,000 worlds that they were too dangerous to mess with. It's the greatest con in galactic history. The most successful psychological operation ever conducted. And it worked because humanity understood something the rest of us didn't. The fear of a weapon is often more powerful than the weapon itself. The threat of force is more effective than actual force. And a reputation for being crazy enough to do anything is worth more than an entire fleet. So here we are, living in a galaxy where humanity stands as the ultimate deterrent, where peace is maintained not by law or ethics or mutual respect, but by the shared terror of what might happen if we upset the humans. It's not ideal. It's not what any of us would have chosen. But it works. It actually works. The final war didn't end with a treaty. It didn't end with surrender. It ended with humanity convincing the entire galaxy that fighting them was suicide. And they did it with technology, psychology, and a willingness to go further than anyone else would dare. They became the thing we feared most. And in doing so, they became the thing that keeps us safe from each other. I still look up at the stars at night. Still wonder what humanity is building out there in the dark. Still feel that little spike of fear when I think about the Phantasm Fleet and the Erasure and whatever else they have got waiting. But I also feel something else now. Something I didn't expect. Respect. Maybe even gratitude. Because for all their tricks and weapons and terrifying displays of power, humanity has done something remarkable. They have created peace, not through conquest, not through empire, but through reputation, through fear, through the simple understanding that some species, when pushed, will burn everything down rather than submit. And nobody wants to be the one who pushes them that far. So yeah, the war is over. Humanity won. The galaxy is different, safer, stranger. And somewhere out there, 30 billion humans are going about their lives, building their worlds, raising their children, completely aware that the rest of the galaxy is absolutely terrified of them. And you know what? They have earned it. They fought the entire collective to a standstill, survived extermination, developed weapons that might not even exist but scare us anyway. They took everything we threw at them and came out stronger, harder, more dangerous. The final war ended with humanity, not defeated. Not victorious in the traditional sense, but standing, still watching, still waiting, still ready to remind anyone who forgets that humans don't surrender, don't quit, and absolutely do not lose. They might die, might sacrifice everything, might drag you down with them. But they do not lose. That's the lesson. That's what the war taught us. That's why peace reigns now, because we learned, finally, painfully, completely. We learned that some species are better left alone, some worlds should never be threatened. And some fights, no matter how much the odds favor you, simply aren't worth having. Welcome to the new galaxy. Population 9 trillion scared beings and 30 billion humans who are just trying to live their lives in peace. We will all get along fine as long as we remember one simple rule. Don't upset the humans. Don't threaten the humans. And definitely, absolutely, under no circumstances, try to conquer the humans. It's a simple rule, easy to follow, and violations carry a penalty that nobody wants to pay. Class dismissed. Try not to start any wars on your way out.